Monster Hunter Wilds is finally here. As someone who enjoyed but never got hooked by the previous entries such as World or Rise, this was the game that clicked for me. The gameplay loop is so addictive. I was always pushing for one more hunt or grinding for one more piece of gear. The monsters are menacing and beautifully designed. Monster Hunter combat has never been better. Just yeah, what a great game. Aside from the performance issues, Capcom really dug deep here and created a quality package for both newcomers and old-time fans. Even though this is the most beginner-friendly Monster Hunter yet, I think the improved combat mechanics and quality fights make it already one of the best action games this year. The premise, of course, is that you are a hunter in a guild where you will be, well, hunting monsters. It sticks to the tested formula of the earlier games, but distills the gameplay loop into the purest form the series has seen. You start a quest to hunt a monster, ride to it on your secret mount, and engage in a long, epic boss fight. Some veterans of the series might miss the slower, more methodical monster tracking in World, but I personally enjoyed the simpler, faster approach here in Wilds. The focus is clearly the monster fighting, but it still allows for exploration for whoever wants it. And the highlight of the game is, of course, the fantastic monsters. While the base roster isn't as numerous as what Rise had, the amount of detail put into these beasts is amazing. Building off of what they've already accomplished in World, Capcom has made these creatures not just video game boss fights, but real, breathing beasts that live in an ecosystem. You'll see them interact dynamically with the environment, fight with smaller creatures, and skirmish against other giant foes. These Balaharas strangled this huge giant Doshaguma monster in the middle of a lightning storm with some of the most cinematic gameplay I've seen recently. The Uthduna stays in watery environments and its slams make huge waves that push you back. These flourishes of interactions make the game far more immersive than a simple boss rush, sucking hours of game time out of me. Similarly, each monster's moveset is unique and goes hand in hand with their physiology. If it has a long tail, you can bet it's got a tail swipe. The big spider thing has a stinger that poisons you. The devs did a really great job here bringing these monsters to life. But what sold me and made me a fan is the improved combat. There are 15 different weapon types with drastically different playstyles. I stuck to the longsword and sword and shield for my playthrough, but each weapon has its own charm. They all have specific movesets that require practice and skill to make the most out of. For those who really enjoy deep combat mechanics, there's a lot to chew on here, from optimizing combo routes to strategizing how to tackle every monster. The biggest addition to the gameplay is the introduction of the wound system. Concentrated attacks on a monster's body part can inflict marked wounds that glow when you enter focus mode. Focus mode is a new mechanic and my favorite. Holding down the LT button brings up a reticle that allows you to accurately aim your attacks, a huge quality of life change that removes a lot of the clunk in the combat of previous games. Using a focus strike on a wound then explodes the wound for big damage, often leaving the monster downed as well for additional aggression. This mechanic synergizes well with being able to break certain monster parts that you will need to craft gear, making it even more rewarding to target specific areas. I had a great time learning the different moves of the monsters to find those windows of opportunity to maximize my DPS. What takes the fights in Wilds to the next level though is how dynamic they play out with the environment. In a game like Dark Souls, the boss fight is always confined to the same arena each time. Not in Monster Hunter, your target moves from area to area where the different terrain, elevation, and surrounding monsters all can influence the fight. Ledges can screw up your movement or provide easy cover to dodge. Other massive monsters can join the brawl as well, creating these epic monster encounters that you just have to improvise around. Hot and cold environments require extra preparation. I like how all of these variables make each encounter feel unpredictable in a cinematic and immersive way. One point of contention that players might be split on is the Sacred Mount. Throughout the game, you'll have access to a Sacred which can auto-path you to the target monster. It's fast and makes actions like healing and sharpening your weapon way more safer than in previous games. I personally really enjoyed the quality of life the Sacred provides, such as faster, less frustrating navigation around the environments to be a plus. But I can also see how fans of World and the monster tracking in that game would see the auto-pathing to be a step backwards. In Wilds, there's a clear emphasis on the moment-to-moment combat instead of the deliberate preparation and tracking. I think this will attract many newcomers, but might be a turnoff for players who like the hunting preparations. For me though, the inclusion of the mount, the increased openness of the world, make Wilds' gameplay loop the most engaging yet. Difficulty-wise, I haven't played enough of the older games to make a complete comparison, but I think the challenge is dialed in at a pretty good spot. The early fights ease newer players into the mechanics and flow of combat, while in the endgame, tempered versions of the hardest monsters become quite punishing. The only shame is that there are only a couple of super tough monsters at the very end to push players. I wished Capcom added a handful of more pinnacle level fights to the endgame to incentivize players to keep grinding, but these will almost certainly be added in DLCs or expansions. It's just a little disappointing that there wasn't a bit more in the base game. Fights feel a bit shorter than the ones in World, but with less downtime running after monsters as they move from area to area. These denser encounters in Wilds felt long enough to be exhilarating as your resources run low, but never dragged on in a way that wastes your time. As for the itemization, you'll still be using the monster parts you collect from hunts to turn into gear. The loop of hunting monsters, carving out their parts, and using them to acquire cool armor is what drives players to keep grinding. There's a good amount of customizability with different armor combinations and jewels, but I do wish the endgame Arshan weapon system wasn't as dominant, or at least more varied, as it makes the weaponization later on a little one note. It's just a little too straightforward and powerful, which pushes a lot of other cool weapons out of the conversation. Either making the standard weapons made from monster parts more competitive, or adding more RNG to the Arshan weapon crafting to give them more variance, I think would make for a better weapon balance. Next, there's the story. It's not good. For as good as the gameplay is, the narrative is easily the weakest part of the game for me. There aren't any exciting twists or thought-provoking ideas here. Aside from Gemma and Alma, the characters are also nothing special. The kid you'll be essentially babysitting, Nada, is especially annoying, and his development didn't land at all for me. I'm sure no one is expecting huge things from the story in a game like Monster Hunter, but given the amount of effort they put into the character designs and cutscenes, it's just a bit of a letdown that the writing and plot weren't at least a little bit better to hold their own with the rest of the quality content. Visually, I thought the game's art direction is great. Colors are vibrant, character designs are unique. Again, the monsters steal the show here. They look so fierce and fantastic, with realistic animations that make them interact so believably with the environments. It's the technical side though that is rough. While the art is beautiful, performance doesn't hold up nearly as well. While I haven't personally experienced issues on a 4070 Super, player feedback has shown that there are clear optimization issues that need to be fixed. I also experienced some visual artifacting occasionally, which was never game-breaking but a slight annoyance. My final criticism is that the UI design is terrible. For how great the game is, navigating menus and using the map are entirely unintuitive. Like, just look at this. It's so cumbersome and annoying to do anything that requires going through the menu. This part of the game needs a complete overhaul, which I hope Capcom eventually addresses. These are unfortunate blemishes on an otherwise fantastic game. I've been loving my time in Monster Hunter Wilds and can see myself playing for hundreds of hours once more endgame content starts rolling in. The fantasy of taking down these giant creatures has never been better. The monster roster is varied and combat refined thanks to great additions like Focus Mode. Wilds has officially made me a Monster Hunter fan, and I can't wait to see what content Capcom has cooking next. If you bounced off of Monster Hunter in the past like me, Wilds may be the entry that changes your mind. Definitely check this one out.